Don't be scared of f3.5. There are some great lenses out there just waiting to be shot. Well, hello again everybody. Thank you once again for checking in, and today I'm going to talk to you about some unloved lenses which nevertheless can make you some very nice images and which are very cheap indeed. These are lenses that people sometimes turn their noses up at, and I've been guilty of the same thing. I've thought to myself, oh gosh, that lens is not fast enough for me to use. I want to make some blur, I want to let some light in. I'm talking about f3.5 lenses, and people do often turn their noses up at them, but really, should we be rejecting them like that? I honestly don't think so. These lenses, an f3.5 lens was considered really fast in its day. It really was, you know, top of the shop, top shelf photo gear in, say, the 20s or the 30s, when, you know, a great many lenses didn't have apertures any wider than f8 or f5.6. You know, those really were the standards of the day. So if you had a lens that could open all the way up to f3.5, well, you were really something. You were the top of the photo tree. You probably had a Leica with an f3.5 Elmar on it. You know, it was that kind of level. I believe there were faster lenses beginning to creep in at that time. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Zeiss had an f2 lens at that time, and in fact Leica themselves had an f2 lens in, I think, the mid to late 30s. But you know, f3.5 was considered fast back in the day, and they don't do any less now than they did then. When you consider that most of the old photos from the 30s and 40s and quite a lot from the 50s and 60s was shot at f3.5, many of them by professionals, many of them very famous images, then maybe we should reconsider this, what is now considered a rather humble aperture value. I think we should. Let me have a look at my notes, put my glasses on, or I won't be able to read them. Okay, that's right. f3.5 lenses have many virtues. First of all, they are small and light, or at least many of them are. A lot of them are rangefinder lenses, like this Industar 50 lens that I've got here, this solid-bodied Industar 50 3.5 f3.5 50mm lens. One of the ugliest, possibly the ugliest lens in the world. Check it out over here, if we can focus on it. Can you see that really is a piece of photographic ugliness? I cannot imagine why it was made in that lens barrel. It is not a beautiful thing by any means. However, it is a very nice lens. It's really sharp, wide open. This is one of the sharpest lenses I've shot for sure. Probably not the sharpest, but certainly one of the sharpest, and it's within a hair's breadth of the sharpest ones that I've shot. It's got very nice colour. The background blur that it makes is not huge, but what there is of it is nice, and if you go near to your subject, you get enough to separate the subject from the background, but still have some detail in the background, which I think is quite important. One of these lenses in solid mount, I think because it's so ugly, will cost you around £10 or £15. They did do it in a collapsible mount like this one, a very beautiful collapsible mount. That one will cost you between what, £60 to £80 maybe a little bit more because it's so beautiful, but the optics are the same. So I would say get one of the solid body versions if you just want something that will make you really nice images. An absolute bargain, 10 to 15 pounds, worth going out and grabbing today. Absolute bargain. Another small and light lens, well, all the collapsible lenses, the Leica collapsibles, the FSU collapsibles, of which this is one. This is a Fed10, but there were also Industar 22 and Industar 50 collapsibles. They are a little more expensive than the solid body versions. They will all cost you from between about 60 to 80 pounds, possibly a little less with patience, and possibly a little more if you buy the first one that you see. The Fed10 comes in both uncoated and coated versions. Uncoated gives you the pre-war look with nice glow from any highlights, but you know, reduced contrast, still a nice sharp lens, give you that lovely pre-war look. The Fed10 coated gives some of the nicest colours I've seen from any lens. Industar 22 colours are great, Industar 50 colours are great, and they're all really sharp as well, so very, very well worth considering. So light and small, I think I've digressed a bit. Light and small, two very important virtues. Another really important virtue is that they're very cheap. These lenses are really cheap because they tend to be overlooked. People tend to think to themselves, oh gosh, I don't want an f3.5, what can I do with that? I want to make loads of blur, I want to be able to shoot in the dark, and because of that these lenses are very cheap. Okay, granted they're not going to make you a huge amount of blur, certainly not as much as an f2 or an f1.4. That is true. As for light gathering, yes, they'll gather more light than an f2, but it doesn't really matter too much anymore because you can always whack up the ISO if you're shooting digital. If you're shooting film, it's more of a handicap, but certainly if you're shooting digital, it really doesn't matter anymore, you know, that much. Obviously you'll hit a limit where you can't go beyond, but you can certainly shoot in low light and even at night if you're you know, you find the right street lighting and so on with one of these, no problem at all. So small and light, cheap, very, very sharp. Did I say they were sharp? Well, if I didn't, I've said it. If I did, I've said it again. So that's two for the price of one. They really are sharp because they don't open up to any more than f3.5, so they've got that inherent sharpness. If you have an f2 lens, or certainly beyond f2, more and more optical flaws begin creeping in, and yeah, you can make blur with them for sure, but every vintage 1.4 I've tested has been soft at f1.4, far softer than if you shut it down to f2 or f2.8, acceptably sharp in many cases, but certainly not as sharp as an image from one of these lenses fully open, an f3.5 fully open. So you don't get those optical flaws. Now in modern lenses it's a very different matter. You have an f1.4 or even an f1.2 modern lens, and you're going to be able to shoot sharp wide open. There will be a small difference if you stop down, but it won't be that great. But with vintage lenses, if you're shooting really any faster, any wider than f2, you're going to get those optical flaws, and the image is going to be soft if you shoot wide open. So another good argument for buying an f3.5 lens. Now these lenses also, if that weren't enough virtues, there's another one. They're often optically absolutely superb. This f3.5, for example, is a really sharp lens. This is a very old lens, it's from the 1930s, but it's incredibly sharp. Even at that time they were making sharp lenses at f3.5. It's just inherent, you know. And if you get a lens that has a tessar design, which a lot of 3.5s are, certainly the former FSU lenses are all tessars, that's an inherently sharp design as well. So, you know, these are often optically superb lenses, and I've shot loads of them, and I've got what I think are some pretty nice results. Whether those images are competition winners, I really don't know, but I think they're pretty nice. I found them pretty pleasing, and the lenses I've shot those with are well, the first one is, I don't actually have it here. This isn't actually it. This is the one I replaced it with. I had not long ago a copy of the Olympus Zuiko 35mm f3.5, and that lens is an absolute gem. I found it to be a gem. I found it to be beautiful, and later when I'd looked on the web, I found that that opinion, that sentiment, was echoed by other photographers who also found it to be a real gem. I foolishly, very foolishly, sold it and replaced it with the Zuiko 35mm f2.8, which I thought would be a better lens because it's just that bit faster. That was the silliness of my thinking. It's a nice lens for sure, but it ain't the 3.5. That 3.5 has star quality. It's one of those lenses that I really shouldn't have sold, and maybe I'll get another one day because it was really nice. That lens, the 35mm Zuiko f3.5, you can buy a nice one for between 40 and 60 pounds. As I say, the f2.8 is nice, and you can stop it down to 3.5, but it just doesn't have the magic. That f3.5 Zuiko 35 is a magical lens, and I wish I still had it. That is one to buy, and if you buy, it's one to keep. Don't sell it like I did. All right, there's also the FSU 3.5s, the FSU rangefinder lenses, many of which were f3.5. So there's the Industar 50, the Industar 22, the f3.10 coated and uncoated. The f3.10 coated, as I've said, will give you the pre-war look. The f3.10 coated will give you some of the nicest colours I've seen from any lens. I kid you not, I'm not enthusing about it or talking it up. It gives some of the nicest colours I've seen from any lens. Loads of FSU 3.5s that you can buy. What else? Oh, I know what else. This one. This is the Olympus f3.5 50mm macro, and I've made loads of shots with this lens. Okay, it's not a true macro, it's a 1:2 rather than a 1:1, but I've used it extensively for shots of cameras and lenses on the channel, videos of cameras and lenses up close on the channel, stuff I've been selling on eBay, and also general photographic work. It's a beautiful lens. It's incredibly sharp. It's got inherent sharpness at f3.5. Stop it down and it doesn't really get noticeably sharper, so it's like a modern lens in that respect. It's a beautiful optic. I've made some lovely shots with it, what I think are lovely shots with it in general day-to-day photography. However, it's not one of the cheaper f3.5s. I was very lucky when I bought this lens. I bought it in a bundle. I'll just show it to you up close. I bought it in a bundle of an OM2N and a Zuiko 50mm 1.8, which I bought, and it came with this lens as well, and I was lucky enough to buy that for £100. There is the lens up close, by the way. I was lucky enough to buy that for £100, but that was really unusual. More often than not, this lens will cost, I should say, between what, £100 to £150, but that's still really good value for a lens that is very, very versatile, has a very, very close focusing distance, and, you know, can be used in general photography as well. I don't think that's a bad price at all. So there are plenty of these on eBay and other places. So that is a very beautiful f3.5 lens. Now, I think one of the reasons these lenses do get overlooked, and maybe the main reason they get overlooked, is because they don't make a great deal of background blur, or at least they don't make as much background blur as a lens that opens up wider will do. And you know, it's become something of a fashion, hasn't it? The fashion for background blur, for bokeh. I think maybe with younger photographers it's a big thing. I must admit, it's a trap I've fallen into myself. I've thought to myself, oh gosh, well, f3.5 is nowhere near enough for me. I need a much faster lens. I want to get the maximum blur I can get. But I think the pursuit of blur for its own sake is an error. A shot with very strong background blur can be a good shot, but it's not always, and it's not necessarily a good shot. The idea that the more background blur the better, I think, is probably not one that we should be exploring as an end in itself. I mean, there are a lot of lenses coming onto the market now, very, very fast lenses for both APS-C and full frame cameras, f1.2, f1, f.95. These lenses make a phenomenal amount of blur, it cannot be denied, and when you go up close to your subject, they make the blurriest blur in the world. You've never seen blur like it. But do we need that much blur? I really don't know. Honestly, if we're getting to the point that we can't see any detail in the background, the blur is so great that all we've got is a sort of a vague wash of light with maybe some shapes here and there to be made out, maybe not. If we're at that point, I think we've probably got too much blur. Surely the trick is to blur the background a little, keep some recognizable forms and shapes so you can actually see what's going on, but separate the subject from the background. That really is the blur ideal, not necessarily to get the maximum blur you can at the expense of all else. So I'm not really sure we need the amount of blur that an f.95 lens might offer us. For example, I think really massive blur like that is best kept for specific aesthetic effects. If you know what you want, if you know you want a very blurry background, and you know that aesthetic effect that you're going for, then by all means go out and do it. Or if you want to play around with a bit of blur, by all means go and do it. But better reserved for a special aesthetic effect or a special practical purpose. For example, Stanley Kubrick shooting a film called Barry Lyndon, not one of his best known films. It was an adaptation of a William Thackeray novel, shot in about 68, 69, and him and his DOP, his director of photography, decided that they weren't going to use any artificial light on that shoot. And when it came to an indoor shot at night, they decided they'd shoot it all by candlelight. So they worked in conjunction with NASA to create an f.7 lens. Now that was a stunning technical achievement for the time. I think it was f.7 anyway, let me check. Yeah, f.7. Stunning technical achievement for the time, but it was made only to shoot an indoor scene at night, shot only by candlelight. And you can go and watch that scene if you want. It's a very, very famous scene. Check it out. It's bound to be on YouTube somewhere, so have a look at it. That was the scene that the f.7 lens was commissioned for. Kubrick worked with NASA. I don't know whether they already had that lens or whether they just had the technology to create that lens, but that's what he used it for. So, best reserved for aesthetic effects, practical effects, in my opinion, or experimentation and having a bit of fun. But the main point of today's, well, I was going to say lesson. I think I was a teacher for too long. The main point of today's video is f3.5 is fine. Don't be scared of f3.5. There are some great lenses out there just waiting to be shot, and if you've not shot one before, look one up. Maybe just the humble Industar 50 if you want to start cheap. Look one up, buy one, shoot one. I think you'll be surprised at the results. So I think that's it from me for today. As always, I would like to thank our subscribers in what is a heartfelt thanks. We're at nearly 32,000 subscribers now, and that is an achievement that, you know, is just astonishing to me. I never expected to have anything like that when I began the channel. So many, many thanks for all your subs. If you like the show today, please do chuck us a sub. That would be greatly appreciated. It would be nice to break 32,000 when we can. So that would be cool. Chuck us a sub if you can. Many, many thanks also go to patrons. I've said it before and I'll say it again. We couldn't do what we do on this show without the support of patrons. So many thanks to you. If you've subscribed, if you've been a patron and left us, if you've been a patron since the beginning and stuck with us, if you're just a brand new patron now, many, many thanks to you all. And that is a heartfelt thanks from my heart, and also from my microphone, which I just managed to give a nice big whack to. So thank you everybody. Like, subscribe, ring the bell, do all those YouTubey things, and if you're not doing anything next week at this time, please do join me for a spot more Zenography. But for now, cheerio all. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye bye.